Hi, everybody. Welcome to this Gallery Teacher Masterclass. My name is Cristina, and the topic of this webinar is recycling vocabulary activities. First, let's take a look at today's agenda. So we will be looking at, first of all, why is vocabulary so important for our students? Then we will be looking at why is it that we cannot remember lexis, no matter how important it is. Then we will look at what is it that as teachers we can do in the classroom to remember and to ensure that our students retain the vocab. We will obviously be looking at practical activities, so activities that work on the receptive knowledge of lexis and also activities that work on the productive knowledge of lexis. And we will have a short conclusion. Let's start with this quote from David Wilkins. As you can see, there are two sentences, two gaps, and two answers. So which word goes into which gap? Type the number and the answer in the chat. I'll give you a minute. Yeah, I can see some good answers. Yes, exactly. Well done. Yes, you're right. So, as David Wilkins said, without grammar, very little is conveyed. True, we do need grammar, but without vocabulary, nothing can be conveyed. I mean, try having a conversation with only function words like as or. Technically, it's impossible. And TESOL students see acquisition of lexis as the greatest help when it comes to acquiring better mastery of the language, but also they see it as their greatest source of problem. And everyone, teachers alike, we seem to think that learners will somehow pick up words and retain them without effort. I mean, I've been guilty of this, telling the students just read and you will get more lexis. But unfortunately, that is not the case. I mean, isn't this the case in your professional experience that even if you teach the students the meaning, the form, the pronunciation of the word, and you've seen it first in context, they even maybe deduce the meaning from that set context. Isn't it true that this tends to happen? It seems that it goes in one ear and goes out the next immediately. So why is that? Well, first of all, one has to realize that this isn't because our students are particularly lazy or very bad. On the contrary, it happens to everyone, no matter what kind of students you have. Why is it? Because 80% of material is lost within 24 hours of initial learning. And this is a fact. This is according to the theory of the forgetting curve. This forgetting is actually a natural fact of learning. Words are not learned in a linear fashion. There isn't always an incremental advancement, and unfortunately, backsliding, will happen. And this is according to Schmidt, if you're interested in researching this further. Now, another reason why it seems to be going in one ear and then out the other is that, unfortunately, it is compounded by the fact that some researchers have actually suggested that we need a serious amount of encounters with the word for learning to take place. Now, researchers don't agree on the number. It ranges from 5 up to 20 encounters that would be necessary. But that is why just seeing the word once in a text means that the learners will not be able to retain it and remember it the next time, even if you have taught it. So we should view partial vocabulary knowledge as being in a state of flux, with both learning and forgetting occurring. But this state of flux can be we can remedy this, and It will stop only when the word is mastered and fixed in how? Well, it has to be fixed in the long-term memory. This is the greatest challenge for language learners, to transform lexis from the quickly forgotten world of the working short-term memory into the long-term memory. This workshop will look at how to achieve this, to ensure that the lexical material moves into permanent long-term memory, and also how to drastically reduce the rate of forgetting. What can we do? Well, this is what the workshop is about. It's about recycling vocabulary as often as possible. And in activities that have students actively recall words and produce them, just not merely seeing and hearing them. The principle of recalling it is very important. So how can we do this? Well, the first thing we can do is repetition. Repetition activities are very important, and repetition is an important aid to learning. But we're not talking simply about repeating the item or re-encountering them in their original context. No, what we need is that it's much better to recycle them in different ways, either individually or ideally at different levels of depth. And what do I mean by different levels of depth? Well, when you encounter a word, or when you learn, when you know a word, you know it at different levels. So obviously, it's not only do you understand what is written or spoken in a given context, but do you, for example, do you recall it when you need it? Do you know what part of speech it is? Do you know the related words? So we're talking about also frequency, collocation, connotation. So when we're talking about repetition activities, we're talking about not just repeating the words, but in just one context, but we're talking at looking at them, recycling them at successful level of depth. So not just, let's say recall, but also working on other things, other levels. Another very important type of activity to help with retention would be retrieval activities. Now, they are important. Why? Because the act of recalling or retrieving a word from memory actually makes it more likely that the learner will be able to retrieve it, to recall it again later. And that's according to Thornberry. Now, it is important to note that retrieval is a more effective way of learning than simple exposure, or just seeing the word over and over. Therefore, just like I mentioned before, just telling our learners to read more doesn't mean they'll be able to use more lexis. So how can we do this? Well, we shall now look at two types of activities. The first type will be looking at recycling vocab activities that build on receptive knowledge of vocab. So we're talking about things that help students recognize, recall the meaning and the form of the words. That is good, but we can also work on something else, which is recycling vocab activities that expand students' productive knowledge, and by encouraging fluent word usage in speaking and writing activity. Why? Because remember when we talked about different level of depth when it comes to knowing a word? Well, one of the most important would be, can the students use it in an original sentence, both spoken or written? And this is what these activities, that expand productive knowledge, will look at. However, and this is very important, when we're going to be recycling these activities, we have to go according to a certain principle. The aim is that not only receptive knowledge of vocab is reviewed, but also productive knowledge, as we mentioned. So therefore, we need a balanced approach of moving from receptive mastery to productive mastery of lexis, and this in a meaningful context. However, when applying those activities and those principles, it is essential that we follow the principle of expanding rehearsal. Why? Because we want to ensure retention. Now, this principle of expanding rehearsal suggests that learners need to review new material soon after the initial meeting. And then it needs to be done at gradually increasing intervals in order to ensure retention. So review activities should be ideally scheduled according to this. So 5 to 10 minutes after class, there should be a little bit of a review. Then 24 hours later, and we got 1 week later, 1 month later, and then 6 months later. Why is this? This is very important. This ensures that the forgetting curve that we saw earlier on in figure 2 is actually minimized, as you can see in figure 3. We have to realize that with lexis, vocab cannot just be picked up as if by magic, only through exposure. And recycling activities are essential, but they need to be scheduled according to this similar schedule as this one in order to ensure retention. Now, enough theory, let's have a look at some practice. Let's look at some receptive activities first. Now, the next 15 or so activities can all be done from this preparation. That is it. We are talking very, very low prep here because we know that we are all busy. So what you need to do is get a bag, any bag. Can be a tote bag, can be a plastic bag. It doesn't matter. Okay? Keep a bag in your classroom and write all new lexical items on a piece of paper. We all make too many copies. There's always, extra papers lying around. Just flip it, and on those, cut them into cards and just write the new lexical items as they occur in the classroom when they're doing a listening activity or something like that. That way you don't have to do it on your own time. Write the lexical items on that little piece of paper and just drop them in the bag. That's it. That's all the prep you need to do. And this vocab bag can be used for the next 15 activities, which is great because we don't have time to spend on just creating and cutting up paper as for all the classes. So let's look at the first one. The first one is the hot seat. I'm sure you've already played it. So you divide the class into groups, into teams. One member from each team sits in their team chairs, obviously facing away from the board, and the teacher writes one of the words or the idioms, the lexical item, from the bag. So you just take it at random from the bag, you write it on the board. You can even stick it on the board if you don't feel like writing it. The game starts with the team having 1 minute using only verbal cues to get the seated teammate to guess the item on the board. And the first student in the hot seat to say the word scores a point for the team. And then you change, 2 more students, or depending on the number of teams, they go in on the hot seats and the teacher writes, or you stick a new word on the board from the vocab bag, and the first team to score X amount of points win the game. That's a great way to recycle vocabulary and ensure retention. Now, another activity that you can do is called the word grab. Again, take words from the vocab bag, stick them around the walls if you're allowed, with blue tack if you're not. It does happen that unfortunately blue tack does damage the wall a little bit, so just put them on the floor depending on space. Let the students stroll around, look at the words and check the meaning with their partners. That's quite important before you do the game. Then when the students have had time to locate all the words, they can stand around and you, the teacher, start calling out definition, and the students have to run and grab the words. So it's nice. It has an element of movement. They don't produce the definitions, but they still have to be able to understand the meaning in order to go and grab the words. So that's a nice activity. Another one would be the categorizing activity. Now, here you have a choice. You can either yourself, as a teacher, choose some category headings, or you can ask the students to choose them. But what you do then is that you take some of the words from the vocab bag, and the students have to sort out these words from the bag into groups. But have to justify why they put certain items in some categories. Now, at lower levels, you can make the categories quite easy. So it's easy, it's a type of, but if you go higher level, then you can generate more discussion if you make the categories a little bit more nebulous. So they really have to try and justify, try to justify why they would be there. So that would generate more speaking and more processing also of the words. Another nice activity for ensuring retention is the board rush. So divide the class into teams, and as big as you need according to the number of students. So, and in each team you give a number. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Divide the board into columns for each team. So let's say if there's 5 teams, 5 columns. Then you shout out a number. So let's say number 3, and all the number 3s will have to play that round. Take your vocab bag. Remember, can you see on the top right corner the little vocab bag icon? That shows that it comes from there. You pull out some word cards randomly and you define one of them. And the representative, the people, the team member, instead of coming to grab it from your hand, which could be quite problematic, they have to rush to the board and write the word on the board, which is great because it's not just, there's also an element of production here. You're checking the form, and you get to assign points not only for the correct word, but also the correct spelling. So that's quite nice. Another good activity that requires a teeny bit more preparation here is the word stress patterns activity. So you just need to make some cards so you take one of the words from the vocab bag, and you have to make the corresponding card when it comes with word stress. So let's say if the word that you pull out is photograph, then you have to make the card like at the bottom left corner, which, photograph. So you have to make sure that the stress is on the right syllable. So big O and small, small, or big 0, small, small. Okay. So then you stick all the cards around the room, again on the walls if you are allowed, or if not, then on the floor. And the students get a card from, they have to match the words from the bag to the patterns that they have. And then they have to put them next to each other or stick them next to each other. So that's a nice activity here. We're working at a different depth, and we're working at the stress pattern for the words, which is nice. Remember what we discussed, that we need to make sure that the repetition and the retrieval activities are not done only at the same level, but a different level of depth when it comes to the knowledge of the word. Another great activity that is extremely low prep is the anagram activity. You select some words from the bag and just randomly select one, write the word on the board, but make sure that the words have a jumbled spelling. And the students must unscramble the words, either set time limit, let's say they have 10 seconds, 15, 20, I don't know, or as a race, whoever put them into groups, whichever group manages to unscramble the word first wins. A simple activity that does work extremely well also is the finger writing one. Pass the bag around and each student selects one word card, and without showing it to their partner, they have to write the word with their finger on their partner's back. So put them in pairs for this, and the student whose back it is that is the word is written on has to work out the word, guess the word, try to remember the word. Now, this works. This might not work in all classes, so if people are uncomfortable with that, you can ask them to write the word on the partner's hand, or if this doesn't work, also you can ask them to write it in the air. So that would be a nice variation to ensure that this can be adapted to all classes. Another way to recycle lexis is to play the memory circle. So put some of the words from the vocab bag again on the floor in the middle of the room. The students stroll around, look at them, check the meaning with their partners. Then turn all the cards face down. So maybe you can choose maybe 10, 20 words, or some words just from last week or last month, or maybe there's a test coming and you want to just double check that, as you wish. So have the students stand in a circle, or 2 or 3, depending on the number of students you have. And here, students have to clap out a beat. 1, 2, 3, and then each of them has to say a word from the vocab pile, a word, an idiom, an lexical item. So they do that in order. You can call out, if you don't want it to make it too predictable, you can, call out whose turn it is. And so they go 1, 2, 3, and then they say the word table. However, if the students repeat the word or they can't remember it, then they have to sit down. And it's the next person's turn. And the last one standing is the winner. Something that you can play also is the memory game, the Pelmanism, the old memory game that we used to do as children. So here you will have to a little bit of preparation, because you will have to make cards with either the definitions or the pictures, like it shows on the presentation, pictures for some of the items in the bag. And in small group, the students put these pictures face down. And the words from the bag also face down. You align, put them in 3, 3, 3. A box of 3 by 3, like a square of 3 by 3 cards, so 9 in total. And students take turning 2 of them. So they turn one, they turn the other. And if they match the word with the definition or the word with the picture, then the student gets to keep the card. However, if these 2 don't match, put them back face down, and the other student tries to find a pair. And the winner is the one with the most cards at the end of the game. Another nice activity that requires no preparation whatsoever is the 20 questions activity. So the teacher just says, I'm thinking of a word. You've obviously taken one from the vocab bag, and the students must guess the word by asking a series of yes or no questions, and the teacher can only answer yes or no. So very low prep, but this really helps, with retrieval of the word and even question formation when you act it. There is a variation of this game if you want to include a little bit more movement. Have all the students stand up and stick the words from the vocab bag or tape them at the back of the students. If they don't like that, maybe here, or give them, make sure that they don't here or here. They don't, obviously, they're not allowed to look at the word that is taped on them, and the students have to guess the word by only asking yes/no questions, by mingling with all the other students. So they have to ask yes/no question to guess their words, but also they have to answer other students' questions because the other students are trying to find out what those words are taped here and here are for themselves. Call my bluff is also an activity that you can do. Take a word from the vocab bag again, provide 3 definitions of the word, and obviously 1 is correct, only 2 are not, and the students need to guess the right one. Now you can also do this activity, add a little, change it a little bit, adapt it to give more agency and autonomy to your students. Give each, take some words from the vocab bag, give them to the students. They have themselves to come up with 3 definitions, 1 being correct, the other 2 incorrect. Provide them with dictionaries if you need, and they then in pairs or in groups say their definitions, and the other people in the teams need to guess which one is the right one. So that's a nice little change also. Another useful activity for recycling lexis and aiding retrieval is the bingo. Simple bingo. You make a bingo card, a bingo grid. You ask them to do it. You don't have to do it. You can ask the students to do it. And then you take some words from the vocab bag, tip them out. Students pick 12 at random and they fill the grid in. Then you collect them. That way you don't have to create those bingo cards, and you redistribute them to people who didn't, obviously write those bingo cards. The teachers give a brief, so you redistribute 1 per person, and you give a brief definition or synonym of one of the items that are of the lexical items that have been tipped out from the vocab bag. Give it a short definition or a synonym, but do not say the word. And the students think, if the students think that the word, they have the word that you described, and they tick it on their bingo card, the winner is the one who ticks all the items on the card first. You can also, something a bit similar to anagram, you can also have an activity which is called words without vowels. Write up on the board a set of words from the bag without their vowels. So let's say S-S-T-E-R, F-M-Ly. The students have to write down the words. The full word will be, if you want, you can invite somebody to the board, or they can work in groups, and they have to do that. If you want also, you can give some words to the students from the vocab bag. They make the words without vowel, and the people in their groups have to guess the words. So that's a very nice low prep way of recycling vocab, making sure that they know and they see that word again in a different context, and it will help with the meaning and the meaning and the form of the word. Something that requires even less preparation would be the vocab guessing game. So students have some of the recently learned words from the bag. They just have to explain it without showing it in English to the students, to their partners, and the partners have to say the word. Again, could help with trying to remember the meaning. You can also play Pictionary. Divide the class in teams. Each of them show only ask each person from. You divide the class into teams. 1 member from each team goes to the board. The board is divided into sections. Let's say 1 per team, and the teachers show them an item of lexis from the bag. And in 1 minute, the person at the board has to draw the item on the board. And the rest of the group has to guess. Like you can see, my beautiful turkey. Not very good at drawing. Sorry about that. Remember, written clues, verbal cues, and gestures are forbidden. Now, what happens if your students are really bad at drawing? Guess what? Ask them to mime the words instead. Absolutely fine. Okay. Now, most of these activities, they helped with the receptive knowledge of the lexical item. However, it is important to help with the productive generative processing of the lexis. So this involves producing new ways of using the wanted vocab in new contexts, so in speaking and writing activities. So here are some activities to help you with that. The first one would be storytelling. Divide the class into small pairs, into pairs or small group, and you give each group, let's say, 6 words from the vocab bag, and they have to write a small story including these words. So they come up with them, they write those stories, but they leave a blank where the keywords should be. And they pin the stories on the board and get the students to go and read them and try to guess what the words are. So that's nice. So not only they have to produce the story with the words, but then there's also an extra activity where they have to retrieve the words. Obviously, if they can't guess the words, you can display all the missing words mixed up and the students can match them if they can't guess. Another nice activity that helps with productive mastery is about me. Students use the vocab they've learned to write about themselves. They have to write some sentences using some words, maybe from the vocab bag, but these sentences have to be true and they have to relate to them. So demo it, do a little activity, show what it is that needs to be done, and then you give them 10 minutes to write as many sentences as they can. And then what you do is that you collect all these sentences and you read them out, but not saying the name of the student. And the rest of the class has to guess who wrote these sentences about themselves. Obviously, make sure that it's not too revealing and that the people are okay. As you read out the sentences, make sure you correct also any mistakes if needs be. And then the class can vote on the most interesting, original, or funny sentences. So another great activity to recycle lexis in a more productive way is true and false. So students contextualize in this some vocab they've learned by true and false statements. So write up on the board, let's say 10 or 12 items that you want them to review. And each student chooses one of the, a couple of the items, and they write down 2 sentences in which they relate the item to them in some way. But one sentence must be true, one sentence must be false, but not obviously false. Obviously, I'm not like a 7-meter tall giant. That would not work. And then in groups, they have to say the sentences about themselves, and the other people have to guess which one is false and which one is true. Great way to contextualize the vocab and recycle it. A great activity that's slightly more difficult, and this one comes from Morgan and Win Volukri book. The previous one came from Penny Ur, the vocab activity book. Now this one comes from Morgan et al. It's the oracle. Now the oracle is a bit more complex, but quite effective when it comes to recycling learned vocab. Provide 2 slips of papers. 2 slips of paper for each student. Tell the student to think of a question, either personal or more general, like, so, shall I be rich? Will there be a problem next year? Something like that. Shall I get married this year? I don't know. So they write it on one piece of paper, you collect them, put it in one container. And then take some of the words from the vocab bag and just put them in another container. Then you pass these 2 containers around the group, telling the students to close their eyes and pick one from each. So one from the vocab bag and one from those questions that they've written. And then in groups of 4, each student in turn reads out the question slip and then the word from the vocab bag, and they discuss in a group how the word might be interpreted as the answer by the oracle. So, for example, let's say if the question, shall I be rich? And the word that they picked from the vocab bag is global warming. Well, then the questioner might, the group might decide, yes, you shall be rich only if you stop smoking or if you start walking. Okay, so it's great. It's a nice way to recycle vocab, but at the same time, it does ask for a lot more production. Finally, the last activity is called rhymes and couplets. So introduce the concept of rhymes in English and get them to suggest some simple rhymes to go with simple words like make, do, late, those kind of thing. Give them from the vocab bag or from whatever lexis that they've seen ask them to give one to each, and they have to think of at least one word that rhymes with it. If they can't find it, they can ask you, and if you can't find one, take another word. So with this word from the vocab bag and the word that rhymes with it, they have to come up with a poem of 2 lines. So one line with, at the end, the vocab word from the bag or from the lesson, and the second line has to finish with the rhyme. Remember, we're not looking for anything like rhythm or anything, it just has to rhyme. So, for example, if the word that they picked up is fair, ideally it's not fair that my father always gets the best chair. Okay, so they have to come up with something like that. It's just a nice little way to help with the vocab, and obviously if you have fast finishers, they can go and help others, and if you want, you can develop this further by asking them to display their poems and have some illustrations on them. Now, I hope you found these activities very useful and that you have encountered new ways to recycle vocabulary. Don't forget to try some of them in your classroom. Thank you so much for being here today.